Can you hear me? Am I good? All right. I guess they wanted me to remind you that you get like things when you came in. They scanned your thing and they went like feedback. So feedback would be cool. And also, they told me to tell you something else. Say what? Yeah, cell phones. Don't turn turn your cell phones off. Yeah. Hi. I'm going to talk about meat. Specifically, people as meat. Specifically, people as meat in video games. I should probably back up. Hi, I'm Tyreek. Nice to meet you. I am a pixel artist, animator, coder, I guess, currently working on a roguelike platformer called Catacomb Kids, which is not entirely relevant right now. We'll get to that in a bit. But first, I would like to pose to you a question, which is, when was the last time you played a game where you felt like you were inhabiting a human body? Not just controlling a collection of numbers. And I also don't mean like, oh yeah, this is a really well-written character. Like, I feel I can empathize with them. They feel like a person. I mean, like, when was the last time you played a game where you felt breakable? And not just breakable, but consequentially so, where you fear a failure because a failure is the beginning of something worse. So human bodies are incredibly diverse in so many ways, each of us unique with thoughts and feelings, strengths and weaknesses of all our own, bodies coming in all different shapes, sizes, and colors. But we have one thing in common, and that's what we're made out of, which is skin, bone, nerves, blood, meat. Breakable. Unless you're Bruce Willis. But there are a lot of games that disproportionately feature Bruce Willis as a player character. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with power fantasies. I like power. But power isn't a universally human quality. Moreover, power isn't always interesting. But being human, I think, is. So some of you may have noticed that the title of this talk is taken from the famous short story by Terry Bisson called They're Made Out of Meat, which recounts a conversation between two aliens marveling over the fact that the dominant species of life on Earth, that is to say, humans, are made entirely out of meat and communicate by, quote, flapping their meat at each other and, quote, squirting air through their meat, as I am doing right now. So I read this story when I was like a little kid, and it really enamored me not only with science fiction as a whole, but the idea of the physicality of humans. Like, we think, and we feel, and we have like fears and strengths and loves, and some of us are nervous wrecks, but before any of that, we're physical beings that have to exist in this world without falling apart. So how does that work? What physically is a person? Well, we're a lot of things. We're 206 bones wrapped up in 640 muscles, all like weaved through by 40 plus miles of nerves, some 70 plus organs, all held together by this weird sac that's constantly dying and replacing itself. The point I'm trying to make is, we're made out of parts. Many different parts, all working together. A lot of them we need to stay alive, but for many of them, their damages and absences can be adapted to, reckoned with. The 206 bones, 640 muscles, all that, that's usually what we are. But things happen, and we break. Which brings us to the other thing that we are as humans, which is fragile. There are so many things that can go wrong in the human body without much difficulty. Physical traumas are easy to come by. Everybody trips, everybody falls, manage to catch yourself wrong, and your arm can take on a whole new shape, as my brother once learned while he was skating. Don't catch yourself at all, and a concussion might make you forget the entire concert you just came out of, as I once learned while coming out of a concert. And I was fortunate. If I had hit my head worse, that could have been like the beginning of some very serious problems or an ending altogether. And that's to say nothing of the effects of extreme heat, cold, infections, diseases, our irritating need to do things like eat and sleep. And we live in a world filled with sharp things, fast things, hard things, long drops. So let's just not go anywhere or do anything, because the world is terrifying. But even that can mess you up. Like, everybody knows by now that like prolonged periods of sitting will like wreck a body over time, just like, oh, my legs are dying. But also, like damage can be, like the severe damage can be done in even shorter periods than that. Dave Mustaine, the lead singer and guitarist for Megadeth, fell asleep with his arm hanging over the back of a chair and woke up with severe nerve damage that took months to repair. It was like a year before he picked up a guitar again. But that brings me to my next point about what it's like being meat, which is we do repair and we adapt. Dave Mustaine's nerves got right again. My brother's arm got arm-shaped again. Eventually, I did remember that concert. And our physical forms are incredibly resilient. But I just said we were fragile. And now I'm saying we're resilient. But of course we are. We're all of these things. For all of our breakable parts and glowing red weak points, as we have, we're robust, resilient, and capable of surviving extreme traumas. Yes, we're made out of parts, but those parts can fail and be lost, but the whole continues. We're fragile and we break easily, but we can be restored, and what can't be restored can be adapted to. So we're made out of parts, we're fragile, and we're resilient. And it's the combination of these three elements which I think comprises the core of the human physical experience. Just take one away and you're left with either Superman or a robot or a glass figurine. So we're at GDC. What's this got to do with video games? Well, I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of video games feature humans as player characters, which is pretty neat. Humans are cool. I like games. Let's put them together. But while I've noticed there's been a push, and justifiably so, for making characters feel more human in games as far as like the writing them goes, and like making them behave like people and be relatable on an emotional level, it's still, I feel, really fairly uncommon to see humans in games represented as truly physical beings, as breakable, as meat. And I think that as games are, trying and making better progress in representing the emotion of the human experience in games like Gone Home and The Beginner's Guide and so on, we as developers can't ignore the physical aspects of what it's like to be human and these bodies that we inhabit. Many parts, fragile and resilient. So how do we do this? How can we better represent the vast range of human vitality in games? Well, the first thing to do is realize the many ways that health has already been represented in games. So here's where I finally get to mention that game that I'm making. So I've been working on Catacomb Kids for a while. It's a platformer roguelike with all the things you'd expect from a platformer roguelike. Procedurally generated levels, looting, dungeon crawling, you level up, there's permadeath. Is it not going? No. Permadeath. It also has a fairly standard sort of health system, which is you have a certain amount of HP. When you get hit, that number goes down. When it is 0, you are dead. This is video games. If you were trying to represent a not video game, but you want to make it seem very video games, this is the thing that you do. Put some numbers or health bars overheads. It's an easy way to detach events from reality. So this is what I'm going to call the first most basic way of representing health in games, which is through abstraction. People don't really have hit points. I'm sorry to disappoint you. You can't defeat your rude neighbor by repeatedly slapping him in the shin until he explodes. Abstraction of health can be convenient, though. It's easy to understand. The cause and effect are immediate and readable. It lets players plan more effectively when they know that the boss's fireball does 3 damage and they have 8 health, or when they know that it takes 6 bullets to kill someone without body armor. And abstraction doesn't always only take on the form of hit points. Abstraction can also be status effects in JRPGs, like, oh no, my strong dude got poisoned. Now a number is decreasing at regular intervals. Or, dang, my ice cream buddy got blinded. Now the percentage chance of a thing that I want to happening is significantly diminished. I don't actually play a lot of JRPGs, sorry with those examples, but the point still stands that abstractions of health are basically those systems whereby players essentially lack all aspects of meatness, maybe aside from that death is possible. They're not treated as a collection of parts, but as some inseparable whole where injury to any part is an injury to all parts. Neither are they fragile or resilient because both of those require some manner of meaningful change. To be fragile is to be breakable. To be resilient is to be restored from brokenness. With abstracted health systems, player characters are mechanically identical at both 1 health and 100. Or, if there is some mechanical change, it will have no resemblance to the actuality of being human. Mario, for instance. In the 2D Mario games, most of them, you can get up to 3 hit points. 1 for your outfit, 1 for your bigness, and the last one to kill you. That doesn't sound remotely human. 1 for your outfit, 1 for your bigness, and a last one to kill you? Like, what is that? Do people shrink? No, that doesn't happen. Another way to look at it is this. Another way to look at it is this. If you can represent the player character as a ball or some other abstract shape and still have the health system make just as much or just as little sense, it's probably using an abstract representation of health, because there's not really an easy way to convert back and forth between people and balls. If you can, it's hard to believe that anything resembling a human was part of the equation to begin with. Of course, abstraction is far from the only way human physicality can and has been represented in games. There are many games that have tried to employ more representative systems. And one of those games that really opened my eyes to the possibilities was a roguelike called Ivan. A few years ago, I was working on Catacomb Kids, and it was undergoing a major rewrite because, you know, solo indie game dev, I like redoing things. And at the time, I was playing quite a bit of Ivan, which is sort of a comedic, traditional roguelike. It's got this weird banana theme going on. It doesn't take itself very seriously at all. But I was really taken by the health and damage system in the game. So this is a screenshot of the game. It's like, you know, looks like a roguelike. It's got the tiles and the description at the bottom. And over at the side, you can see all your stats. And up at the top, there's like a little representation of your character. And in Ivan, the player's body is separated into 7 different areas: head, body, groin, left and right arm, left and right leg, each of which has its own pool of HP. And alongside this is a more, you know, common abstracted health system where you die if your total HP reaches 0. But each limb, like if your arm reaches zero health, it'll get cut off. If your legs, you can get your legs cut off, and if your body takes too much damage, then you'll die regardless of what your total remaining health pool is. Same with your head and your groin. Now, it's not like I hadn't played games with locational damage before, where you could cripple enemies and blast off their arms and legs and heads, but there are very few where I, as a human character, could undergo those same traumas. The meat feel wasn't relegated only to enemies, but was applied to myself as well in Ivan. And it was important for me to see that the player isn't represented as a robot or a mech or anything else where it would make sense that, oh yeah, you get your arm blown off, you can just get a new one attached, you know? Like, they're represented as a human character. A person that can be destroyed bit by bit or all at once. But like I said, the game's got a comedic vibe to it. It's not realistic at all. You don't have to worry about bleeding out or going into shock or anything. You can get your arm lopped off and you're like, uh-oh, I should get away from whatever made that happen. And it obviously lacks the complexities of trying to accurately represent the whole spectrum of human vitality. And it doesn't try to. It's simple. So here we have another way of representing humans as meat in games, which is a step above abstraction, which is by simplifying. Simplification acknowledges that humans are more than just a hitbox, that we can be damaged in many ways, and that we have more at stake than restarting at a checkpoint or loading your last save. The cost now is change. Fighting and failing, but surviving and emerging different. Playing Ivan, maybe I still wasn't controlling anything quite resembling like a human totally, but it was far less abstract, and it acknowledged what humanity was. And I liked it. So I did what I tend to do when I see something that I like. I stole it and stuffed it into my game. So this is a character in Catacomb Kids. Like when you pause the menu, you get this little view of like your stats and the portrait of your character. And this is what they look like when they're missing a leg. So I added a limb system to Catacomb Kids where you can get your arms or legs chopped off by certain traps and enemies. And it's nothing as in-depth as Ivan's, where it's like, oh, you don't have to worry about the HP of your arm or your torso like getting critical hitted and just destroying everything. But if you're fighting a guy with a giant axe, you might want to make sure you don't come out of the fight with like 2 fewer legs. And there's also a boss in the game called the Reaper, which is like, you know, death with a giant scythe. And it used to have a really annoying habit of chopping off all your arms and legs and then killing you by hitting you with them. But that was kind of unfair, so now he just chops off your arms and turns them into lightning. Again, I'm not really making a masterpiece of realism. But after adding the ability to lose limbs, something happened where there was a new fear in the game, a new consequence, and like a new complication to be thrown at the player. Where before your only goal in each fight was to not die, now there's a whole new potential cost, even upon victory. And moreover, the cost is both meaningful and lasting. It changes you. Losing an arm removes your ability to equip offhand items, and if you're a shield user, that can really screw you up, because now you have to change the entire way you play the game. You have to become more evasive now that you're not able to block attacks. Losing legs is even worse, where you're forced to hop everywhere on your remaining leg, or if you lose both legs, you hop on your torso stump. But it completely changes the feel of movement in the game and makes a lot of maneuvers more difficult to pull off. And it's super annoying. Probably not as bad as reversing the player's controls, but maybe a couple notches below that. But by introducing these lasting consequences to players' actions, choices begin to have more weight. Decisions become more meaningful and the prices paid are more potent. So even looking at the system and realizing its simplicity, that it exists at all, adds a sense of meatiness to the player's failures. And really this is the core of what simplification is when representing human physicality in games. An acknowledgement that we're meat. We're not monolithic beings, but we break and we change. But that's it, just an acknowledgement. And this is usually as far as games go when representing humans in games. I mean, how can it not be? We're not going to get a simulation level of, breaking the skin, that sort of thing. Games will always only ever be able to present an extremely simplified version of humans as physical creatures. We're too complex. You've got to draw the line somewhere. Dwarves, however, maybe we can get a little further with them. So Dwarf Fortress is the only real example that comes to mind of a game going well beyond a simplified representation of meat. Another game descended from the roguelike evolutionary tree, Dwarf Fortress does away with abstraction almost entirely and enters into the realm of simulation. Not only can your arms and legs be broken and severed as in Catacomb Kids and Ivan, but you can get your brain bruised, your lungs can be pierced, you can have items lodged in your flesh and there are pain values associated with certain types of injuries. If your heart is punctured, you don't die because your HP reaches 0. You die because your blood loss becomes too great to sustain your life any further. If you'll indulge me, a quote from the Dwarf Fortress wiki page. Guts. Damage to guts causes great pain and nausea. Creatures will vomit and then retch repeatedly depending on how much damage is caused. This slows the creature and can dehydrate them. When guts are pierced, they may spill out of the wound. This causes a lot of bleeding and exposes the guts themselves as a target for aimed attacks. Slicing off the exposed guts causes heavy bleeding and almost always death. The cut off guts can then be picked up and used as a weapon. So simulation goes above and beyond the expected representation of human physicality in games. It strives to do more than just enhance a sense of meatiness, more than just present fragility and resilience, but it unifies your character with the laws of the world they inhabit. The line is blurred between what's a part of them and what's a part of the world. Where does the self stop and the laws of the wider universe take over? There is no line. They're the same. They're not only in the world, but held together by it and torn apart by it, and then they become it. So this is what simulation means to me. Employing the nuances of our physical existence to blur the line between the player characters and the worlds they inhabit. They're both existing within the world and are a world up unto themselves. So abstraction, simplification, and simulation. Each of these categories can and does mix and mingle with the others to greater and lesser degrees. Games with largely abstract health systems supplemented by a suggestion of hit location like a lot of first-person shooters have with headshots and other sort of tertiary damage. Or games where the player is represented as a breakable being, a mutable collection of parts, working alongside a more familiar abstract system, like with Catacomb Kids. Or games like The Long Dark and other recent survival sims that skew towards the simulation side of simplicity. Or Cataclysm, Dark Days Ahead, which is another roguelike, which straddles the line between simplicity and simulation altogether, while still having some abstracted aspects. Nothing is ever as cut and dry as just, oh, that's simulation, or oh, that's simplistic, or oh, that's abstract. And so, this is some of, I tried to map some. I don't know if they're accurate. But so far, while I've mostly been talking about how damage is sustained in games, there's a whole other side to this equation. The aftermath. How we heal, how we adapt. Once the damage is done and the danger is past, what then? Well, there's an old saying that time heals all wounds, but rarely is the sentiment ever present in games. You're always looking for a med kit or popping a healing potion or calling a cleric to heal you. And Catacomb Kids is guilty of this as well. Restoring your severed limbs is as simple as just drinking a potion of regeneration or casting the regenerate spell on yourself if you know it. And your limbs come back a bit weaker than your original limbs and blue, but they serve the new limbs serve their purpose well enough. If you become diseased or poisoned, a health potion will make you right in an instant. It's all very active healing. So this is what active healing is. Do thing, get better. But rarely is there waiting. I mean, like maybe there's like a little animation for drinking a potion, or like you might have to like sit still for a second while your shields recharge. But beyond that, recovery is usually a matter of fairly low consequence. It's always like a good thing, like you want to recover, you want to heal. In many roguelikes, you can like sit still and like spend a few turns sort of waiting for your health to replenish, but the games are usually already so abstract that this doesn't really do a lot in the way of representing a human need. It's just more of like a mechanical thing where, oh, if you stand still, your health will go up. It's just like barely on the cusp of simplicity and abstraction. But there's no like cleaning your wounds and bandaging them. There's no like keeping to bed as you wait for the poison in you to run its course. There's no actually going to a hospital, like not a haunted hospital full of like demons and stuff, just a normal functioning hospital. Those seem kind of rare to me in games for some reason. Somehow games always seem to have medicine that makes time irrelevant. And I get it, like don't think I'm suggesting that like there's like in shoot 'em ups and like shooters you should like have a long hospital stay after every gunfight where you're just like sitting around playing crossword puzzles and like coding. I mean, maybe that would be interesting. But for the time cost of injury to be so ubiquitously absent in games is a curious thing. And it's not like there haven't been time-sensitive games before. There's like Shenmue, Majora's Mask, and Harvest Moon games. These all like run on a clock. So like maybe in Harvest Moon you could like get kicked in the head by your horse and then like get knocked out, and then you like spend a week in the hospital waiting to recover, and during that time your crops aren't getting taken care of, and your horse is like really sad because he's like, I'm sorry guy, I didn't mean to kick you. But it would cost like the most valuable time, the most valuable resource that you have in the game, or that we have as existing beings, which is time. Your crops won't wait, like Majora's Mask, the falling moon wouldn't wait if you like lost time as a failure, and in Shenmue you'd like lose time and then you'd be like closer to, you know, not getting revenge. And a lot of things can happen in the absence of a person's unwellness. And then there's coping. Accepting that whatever injuries you've sustained, whatever scars you've received, they're just a part of you now. You adapt and recalibrate and learn to move forward through your new normal. Old familiar obstacles become new challenges. Maybe you learn to overcome them again, or with some ingenuity or a different approach, or maybe you don't and find a different new path to take. But humans, I think, are incredible. And maybe I'm the only one, but I'm like constantly amazed by the fact that we live for as long as we do, despite all the million little random things that could go wrong every second. And we're still like tenacious enough to keep existing as meat. I look at us and I feel like the aliens feel from Terry Bisson's story. Like we're made out of meat? Like really? Like, and look what the things that we can do. And games are, as I have mentioned, pretty cool. I like them. And I feel like they're able to give us a unique perspective and let us act like as through the mind and body of another. And in doing so, perhaps let us come to a better understanding of some meat that isn't us, some person that isn't us. And so I've been speaking until now of people as meat, our parts as physical qualities on the most general scale. Because that does interest me, and I do find it fascinating. I want to play more games where I'm fearful and breakable and forced to live with the consequences of my failures and shortcomings, but still somehow continue and grow beyond them. I want to play a game where I'm parts, and I am fragile, and I am resilient. But obviously people are more than meat. People are hopes and loves and hates, hurts, friends, memories. Not every story starts with all 100, or not every story starts with all 206 bones and 640 muscles. And not every story starts young and free of prior consequence. And not every story starts with Bruce Willis. And so this is the other thing that I want from games, is I want to know these stories. I want to see the different types of bodies represented in games. And as, like, for all our glorious shape, and all the glorious shapes and sizes and ages and meatness. I've been Bruce Willis in games many times, but I've never been you. And that's the end. should I leave or? Oh, questions? If anybody? Yeah, microphones. If microphones, if people want to ask things, hello. Okay.
Hi. It's really loud. Okay. This was actually going through my head the other day about the concept of how damage and how people take it in video games works. And I was thinking about a few games that have been time sensitive to those kinds of things, like XCOM. You get hurt enough, they're gone for like weeks while everything is going down on Earth. So I was wondering, do you think there will be a higher demand at some point in time for games to represent more risky mechanics when it comes to health, or is that going to always be like a niche thing?
I don't know. I feel like it's on the rise, especially in games like survival games that have been coming out, like Rust and like all these things that are like, oh, you got to like go out and make your way and survive, and those sorts of games where it's becoming more common for I guess human effort to be introduced into the equation, where it's like you make things, but I still feel like the actual representation of the like physical health of characters might continue being niche. I'm not sure. I hope it becomes a more common thing because I want to play these games.
Yeah, I specifically remember someone talking about that on the forum. Mistake number one on my part. When they mentioned, I suggested that that certain game should be a little more realistic in how you take the image standard, just because I thought it was interesting. Mm-hmm. And they rebutted with, well, then I got to sit through, I don't know, a loading screen for this long, or just wait for my character to get up. It's not going to. Well,
I feel like there are. I can't really speak to every game because every game is different, but I feel like there are ways of making these things still engaging without necessarily making them easy and just like, I got hit and now I'm just like running away until I recover like 5 seconds later or however long. I'm not sure how that would work with every game. In Catacomb Kids, it was fairly easy because it's kind of a cartoony game. It's like, I got my leg chopped off. I can just hop on my other leg forever. Like I don't get tired, but for more realistic games, that would be a problem that they would have to solve in the design phase.
Okay, thank you.
So first thing, I would point out Die Hard.
Yes.
Nintendo Entertainment System, there was a separate meter for Bruce Willis's feet. So, you are not exactly out Bruce Willis.
Okay.
Second thing, I wanted to ask, do you think that there is a kind of point of diminishing returns on how representative you should be of people's meatness in a game? Do you think that there's a point where it goes too far? If so, where would you draw the line? Like, what factors would you take into consideration to where a specific game should draw the line? I guess I should ask, since it's kind of a case-by-case thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, like a matter of like a game. Like, I feel like you could probably make an entire game just that revolves around the concept of a guy like making his way through the woods with a broken leg. Like, if you could probably like make a game with that at its core. So really, it depends on what you're aiming to do in the game. Like if you're making a game that's like an adventure game and you want to be having like an action-y time and you're like trying to have fun, then of course your limits as far as that space would be different from a game where you're trying to like accurately represent someone's survival, or a game where you're just like running through arcadey stuff and just like I'm like losing bits left and right and then getting them back and that sort of thing. I can't really say that there would be a hard line. It depends on what you're doing and what your intention is with the implementation of increased meatness.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
So once upon a time, I saw you tweeting about just random Catacomb Kids lore bits that don't necessarily exist in the game yet.
Right.
And something that I was really taken with is the fact that the Grumbles, the goblin-like creatures in the game, overwhelmingly, commonly give birth to twins.
Yes.
And most Grumbles are twins, and the ones who aren't are trained to be assassins.
Yes.
And I think that's really cool, and that's an aspect of meat that you don't see a lot in video games, right? It's it's a representation of birth. It's like fertility, all that stuff. And I guess my question is what are some qualities of these bits of meat flavor that you can insert in a game? Because to some degree, actually portraying Grumbles as creatures that can be pregnant and that eventually give birth to twins might not be the most elegant way to go about that in an actual game sense.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah. So I like that a tweet told me about this fact of the game, but I'm not sure where in the game I would be able to glean this fact. In what way would this thing make it into the game?
Probably just reading the lore once I add it.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was some sort of mechanical way that you had.
If it were a mechanical thing, it might just be Grumbles coming in pairs or something like that.
Okay.
I got to get there.
That seems fine.
And
I just thought that was
that's
cool.
the end of my time. So
Thank you.
thank you.